Hello and welcome. My name is Matt Hart, and I'm joined here today by my brother Trevor.
Hi, I'm Trevor.
And we're here actually today to have a somewhat serious conversation about the topic of race in media. This thought kind of came to me the other day. I was watching the Oscars, and Big Hero 6 ended up winning for Best Animated Feature, and I ended up going to see it the other night. And one of the first things that jumped out to me was that the two main characters were both half Asian, just like my brother and I. And it really kind of struck me because I had never really thought about it, but you know, that's not a very common occurrence. And it made me think back to all as I was growing up, and it seemed like the only outlet I would ever have to actually see figures in any form of media that kind of resembled what me and my brother looked like was through video games. So we're kind of here just to go back and forth because we never actually discussed this. But we're just going to see, you know, thoughts from our childhood and see, yeah, what we can learn. So what movies growing up or cinema or TV shows, video games, what jumped out to you the most when you were growing up?
Well, I mean, I grew up, you know, late 80s, blah, blah, blah. So, you know, weekly cartoons and things like that, like Transformers and, to a lesser extent, G.I. Joe and Ninja Turtles, things like that. I mean, that was kind of the bread and butter growing up. That was what the playground talk was all about.
So who was your favorite G.I. Joe?
Snake Eyes, the White Ninja.
I was going to say Snake Eyes. I feel like everyone loves Snake Eyes, but also, you know, I guess my first thought would be that maybe it's because Snake Eyes, you didn't know that he was a white guy until much later.
Well, I only knew because I had a toy when I was a kid, and you could take his goggles off because this was the goggles Snake Eyes with the red goggles as opposed to the metal visor, and I noticed he had blonde eyebrows, and I remember that sticking out to me because I was like,
huh.
I was like 4 or 5 years old, and I remember seeing that and going, huh. And that affected me, and that stuck with me to this day.
Yeah, no, it's exactly, and it's funny because if you just take a moment and you think back to everything you just mentioned there, like, you're dealing with things that don't have people in them, really. Transformers, you know, yeah, they were human characters, but they were lame, and nobody ever wanted to see them on screen anyway. Like, I mean, they really served almost no purpose driving the plot forward, and as far as I was concerned.
Yeah, basically.
And Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, too, I mean, as well. You know, yeah, there were characters that came from time to time, but for the most part, they were all animals.
Yeah, I mean, all the characters that stuck out to you, especially when you were a kid, were, you know, the new action figure of the week, the new mutated character,
the new robot.
Yeah, the new Metalhead, or the Foot Clan guys, or the Stone Warriors, and then the rest, like the characters that drove the plot were the reporter crews, like the Vernon and April O'Neil and I forget the manager's name or whatever, but
yeah, I couldn't even tell you what they looked like other than April O'Neil, to be honest. Like, that's how non-memorable they were to me, if that's even a word. But yeah, I mean, that gives you an idea. Like, I remember I used to be a huge fan of the G.I. Joe animated series. And my favorite character was Egon. And I think he was my favorite character because I kind of wanted to look like him, because I thought he was neat, even though he was total geek with a weird bouffant hairdo.
Hang on, but you mean the real Ghostbusters?
The original cartoon.
Okay.
So yeah.
Yeah, that hairdo.
I mean, I've always had some sort of draw to bizarre hairstyles, I guess, but
you didn't want to be Peter Venkman?
Well, and that's the funny thing, because I kind of looked more like him. But,
well, yeah, most people do.
Right, but that's the thing, is like, it was more an issue. Like, I remember Mom used to convince me to eat my bread crusts by telling me my hair would get more wavy and curly, which is a complete line of shit. And you know, years of therapy are never going to compensate for that. But no, I mean, realistically, it's one of those things you don't think about, really, but those were moments standing in the mirror for me of combing my hair, hoping that it would resemble something that was entirely natural for me, and that's because those were, you know, that was images of, you know, what figures I could look up to, and I didn't resemble that, and I wanted to, which was very unfortunate, But everyone goes through it now, and you know, you see it constantly. Like I said, I think what inspired me to even sit down with you and ask you about this was at the Oscars. So many people were bringing up social issues when they were receiving their awards. So you know, there's much more work to be done, and you know, this will probably be a very, very minor drop in the bucket. But you know, every little bit helps, especially you know, for all those Hapa kids out there who, you know, seem to be growing in numbers. I mean, I swear every group of kids now has at least one half Asian one.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's all them white dads.
they love their Asian wives.
And what's up with you Asian ladies? Why you gotta be so attracted to the tall white dudes? Like,
well, maybe
I know they're tall, but
it's everything we're discussing right now, probably. But
yeah, actually, if you're bombarded by so many images throughout your life for so long, it starts to come across as normal or regular.
And yeah, and that's the problem. You know, right now, like, I'm a huge proponent. I really am disappointed that there aren't more black lead characters in video games. Yeah. I think when I look back, like, they are getting better. I mean, everything is progressing. Like I said, Big Hero 6, the movie, does a wonderful job of portraying race in such a non-issue sort of way, like, you know, the way it should be. Just, you are who you are, and that's great. In video games, yeah, you know, you have so many period ones going along, so I understand sometimes that isn't realistic, but
yeah.
you know, but you know, it's ridiculous because I remember, you know, it seemed like, you know, when we were kids, like, the black characters were always the afterthought.
Yeah, they were the token for the most part. I mean,
yeah,
freaking Jax from Mortal Kombat. Like, his only contribution in his first iteration was the gotcha grab, which was amazing. But
well, I was gonna say he was one of the most badass characters I could think of in the series, and yet he was one of the worst to play with.
Yeah, I mean,
and that seemed to be a recurring thing. Like, Balrog had an awesome story in the sense that, you know, everyone heard the rumors of him being the guy with concrete in his fists, and you know, he was just Mike Tyson, who was at the time, you know, before he became an awful human being, and has since redeemed himself. But you know, before he completely, you know, destroyed his image, he was, you know, the biggest thing in boxing, biggest thing in sports, arguably. And, you know, Balrog was a direct ripoff, but nobody wanted to use Balrog. He sucked.
Yeah.
I mean, do you know anybody in a Street Fighter tournament who uses Balrog?
Fuck, I don't know. Not that I know of.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't follow this stuff. I'm sure other people would know that, you know.
I'm sure somebody knows something about hitboxes and frame rates and things like that and can completely refute this argument. But the point is, yeah, in playground logic at the time, when Street Fighter 2 was the hot game, I can't recall a single person that would willingly pick Balrog.
Yeah, and to a lesser extent, even Dalsum, you know, the Indian character who was probably the worst caricature of the bunch.
You think?
I mean, look, let's face it, they were video games. Okay, well. Okay, you win. But no, like, look, it's video games, it's progressing, you know, it's taking time. I don't hold them that accountable for the past because it was, you know, no one would have expected it to take off like it has.
Yeah.
The reason I bring up video games, though, is part of the reason I was attracted to games like Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat, or pretty much any of them, to be honest, because so many of them were coming out of Japan at the time. But the main protagonists oftentimes resembled you or I. Like, you could actually look at a character like, you know, Ryu and see your own features and be like, that's pretty cool, you know? You know, so it is kind of interesting seeing now as video games have become a part of culture, now that is influencing modern, you know, cinema. And then you have, you know, the other end, you have Michael Bay making movies for China, which take back any strides any of these other films have possibly made.
I ate the whole plate.
Yeah, I do feel that video games are seemingly lagging behind, especially in regards to black protagonists, because in other mediums, especially, you know, nerdy shit. Like, it seems like of all things, comic books actually seem to be like the most progressive thing right now. Like,
yeah, I agree totally, and yeah, that's funny because normally I'm an older guy when it comes, like, I'm kind of a traditionalist, and so seeing sometimes when they change characters' race and all that, you would figure that I would react to that. I don't. Like, I actually think it's a really neat way to reintroduce certain characters, especially ones that a lot of times weren't relating to the modern times. My first example I can think of is like Nick Fury. I think is a badass, absolutely awesome character, but he's also a very dated figure from an era that no longer exists. And so finally, you know, seeing the Samuel L. Jackson interpretation of him, that's also, I believe, a part of the canon now of
they're just now positioning that in the Marvel canon. In 2000, Marvel started their Ultimate line of comics. That the whole point was it was supposed to run parallel to the movie universe that they were just starting, and the idea was they were trying to clear up all the continuity to make it more inviting to new readers. And in the Ultimate line of books, they actually acquired Samuel L. Jackson's permission to use his image and likeness for Nick Fury because I think it was Mark Millar. He wanted to do that, and apparently Samuel L. Jackson is pretty keen on comics, especially Marvel. So in the Ultimate line of comics, Nick Fury was Samuel L. Jackson, just like he is in the movies. And like as we speak right now, there's a Nick Fury Jr. character in the mainstream Marvel canon who is being positioned to be the Nick Fury. They just recently effectively erased the old, you know,
cigar chomping, womanizing,
David
one-eyed
Nick Fury with the, you know, the eye patch and the hair and the, you know, bigotry.
Right, and you know, once again, a dated era, which is at the root of what we're discussing right now. That was from a different time. That was when that's what you looked up to. That was who was protecting America from all those invaders from other nations, and, you know, be damned. But so it is interesting. I really, you know, I would like to see more black characters too, because I feel like people actually do enjoy playing as something different than just themselves too, in that I think it gives you a chance to experience more than just, you know, your universe. Like I mean, like in Grand Theft Auto 5, where you get to see like 3 very distinctive viewpoints, where you have like this character who's crazy, you have a character who's kind of this like yuppie, and then you have you know, a character who's grows up in, you know, the ghetto, but, you know, wants to escape, and it actually is the good guy of the bunch. So, you know, I think it also does good to, you know, see a balance there in that.
It's kind of funny that, like, it's hard for me to believe, like, coming from, you know, late 80s, like, Nintendo kid stuff, like, to know now that video games have actually eclipsed mainstream film in terms of money making. Like, in terms of budget and money generated, AAA games really have eclipsed films, and it's insane to think that. But when you're dealing with statistics of that magnitude, I think a lot of it comes down to playing the demographic game. Like Matthew, my brother, he just mentioned Michael Bay basically made Transformers 4 seemingly to get the China audience. Like, the whole last 45 minutes of that film are basically one of those cheesy, you know, come visit California commercials, but in
for
Hong
China,
Kong,
yeah.
But for China in Hong Kong. And if you're at all up on Chinese cinema, like I am, you would recognize a whole lot of cameos in that short span of time. Just, you know, background characters who, if you're an American audience, you have no idea who these people are, but there's huge celebrities in China. But I think that's where part of the problem comes in, is when you're dealing with generating that much money and rolling them dice. It's you have to take the sure bet, and I get the feeling that these big companies just don't have the balls to back a horse starring a black character.
Well, and I guess what's even more interesting is going forward, because one of the big things in gaming right now is you know, Japan is kind of adapting their market. Like, there's a lot of talk that the new Final Fantasy is going to be arguably the last console game really in Japan, just because it's a small island. It's a very tight living quarters, and a lot of people, you know, live in the space of your living room over there. So you can't really have a setup, you know, where a kid's dominating the TV console all day to play a game, and that's, you know, everything is on mobile over there. I mean, they're very tech forward over in Japan, and you know, everyone plays mobile games. They're at the forefront of everything. So that's what they're saying, is that with Final Fantasy, that might be the last one. So it'll be interesting if not many mainstream games are coming out of Japan. Will that affect how the characters look? Obviously, Final Fantasy is an example where almost everyone looks Asian or half Asian. But, you know, will we continue to see that aesthetic, or are characters going to start looking more traditionally, you know, Anglo? Are we going to see more black characters but in more stereotypical fashion? Are we ever going to see Hispanic characters, really?
Oh, hey, don't knock Ramirez. I mean, he fought the whole damn war in Call of Duty. I mean,
he did survive. It's impressive.
he didn't have a face, but, you know, he fought the war.
Right.
It's the story of every Mexican soldier out there, I guess.
Yeah, I was going to
underappreciated, not acknowledged, but definitely the backbone.
Yeah.
Sad but true.
Very sad but true. I mean, hell, you can even make the same argument in boxing, but that's an entirely another issue altogether. But yeah, so yeah, I am very curious to see what the future holds with that. You know, will we see more Happas in cinema or in media in general? You know, one of the things with Big Hero 6 that really impressed me was that it's seemingly, and I haven't done the full research on it, but I believe that the two of the main characters that are half Asian in it are actually played by half Asian actors as well.
Really?
Which is really a big deal too.
Yeah.
Because I remember in the very beginning I kind of scoffed, because there is a character that has a very Japanese name, and he's kind of portrayed almost like a sumo wrestler, and he's very clearly voiced by a white guy. And at first, it turned me off to it, honestly, because I felt like that was going to be the case with everything. And then, with IMDb, I realized I was a complete idiot, and I have to apologize for that moment of scoffing at the film, because it's a wonderful movie. It really is. And, you know, and I really hope it continues to do well, you know, with its DVD release and everything. But, yeah. Do you think mobile gaming is going... I mean, what direction do you think that's going to go with their types of characters? Are we going to see with video games maybe a lack of even major noticeable characters? Like, are we ever going to see another Ken or Ryu or hell, Guile even?
Japan has a very long history of building on iteration. Like, they're traditionalists. So once something is an established thing, I admire their ability to, like, hold on to it and continue building on it, as opposed to discarding and rebuilding, like say a comic book character reboot or something. Godzilla films have been made in Japan for over 50 years.
Right.
And they have yet to make one without a guy in a suit, and I really admire that. And Ken and Ryu, they've been around since, God, like 1989 probably, maybe even before that, with the first Street Fighter game, and yet they're fundamentally the same in appearance, and that shows dedication on their end. But what you're saying about the mobile games, Monster Hunter is an incredibly massive franchise in Japan. It hasn't really caught on here, but it's one of the biggest games around, as is what was it, Final Fantasy 14, which is an MMO.
Right.
And both of those games, like as you're kind of pointing out, they don't really have distinct characters. They're all player-created characters that are more about costuming and accessorizing than about actually constructing distinct characters with personalities, let alone stories of their own. So, I don't know, the mobile environment does lead to a lot of microtransactions and things like that, customization, and you can't have an in-depth level of customization and have a really distinct, powerful storyline you can't have those run together.
Right.
Like, you have to cut one to get the other. So, I don't know, I get the feeling that, yeah, in that mobile environment, we probably won't see too many characters.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to wait and see. I mean, the future's looking brighter every day, I will say that. I mean, but there's so much work that still needs to be done. And all we can do is hope and discuss and see what happens. But it's been good. It's been good to get your views on things, and I appreciate you taking the time, and you out there for listening. And this is Matt Hart, and we'll catch you next time.
Take care. Bye-bye.